Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Squeaky machine. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajaka Stottara Satashri Srimad Divine Grace Abhaya Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantaraja Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Gaur Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai. Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we'll hear from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 7. What Prahlāda learned in the womb, text 1. New week, new chapter. Magic. Yeah, why not? I have plenty of time after all. You've been to one of my classes, right? Chapter summary. Interesting. As an old English major, I would call this a head note. Summary usually comes after. In this chapter, to dissipate the doubts of his class friends, the sons of the demons, Prahlāda Mahārāja states how within the womb of his mother he had heard from the mouth of Nārada Muni, who had instructed him in Bhagavat Dharma. When Hiranyakashipu left his kingdom and went to the mountain known as Mandarachala to execute severe austerities, all the demons scattered. Hiranyakashipu's wife, Kayadhu, was pregnant at that time, and the demigods, mistakenly thinking that she carried another demon in her womb, arrested her. Their plan was that as soon as the child took birth, they would kill him. While they were taking Kayadhu to the heavenly planets, they met Nārada Muni, who stopped them from taking her away and took her to his ashram until Hiranyakashipu's return. In Nārada Muni's ashram, Kayadhu prayed for the protection of the baby in her womb, and Nārada Muni reassured her and gave her instructions on spiritual knowledge. Taking advantage of those instructions, Prahlāda Mahārāja, although a small baby within the womb, listened very carefully. The spirit soul is always apart from the material body. There's no change in the spiritual form of the living entity. Any person above the bodily conception of life is pure and can receive transcendental knowledge. This transcendental knowledge is devotional service, and Prahlāda Mahārāja, while living in the womb of his mother, received instructions in devotional service from Nārada Muni. Any person engaged in the service of the Lord through the instructions of a bona fide spiritual master is immediately liberated, and being free from the clutches of Maya, he is relieved of all ignorance and material desires. The duty of everyone is to take shelter of the Supreme Lord and thus become free from all material desires. Regardless of the material condition in which one is situated, one can achieve this perfection. Kind of the gist of today's purport, so I'll read that sentence again. Regardless of the material condition in which one is situated, one can achieve this perfection. Devotional service is not dependent on the material activities of austerity, penance, mystic yoga, or piety. Bhakti Devi is completely independent. Every bit as independent as the Lord. Even without such assets, one can achieve pure devotional service through the mercy of a pure devotee. Text 1. Sri Nārada Uvacha Evam Daitya Sutai Prashto Mahābhagavato Sura Uvachatam Smayamanaha Smaran Anubhashitam Sri Nārada Uvacha Evam Daitya Sutai Prashto Mahābhagavato Sura Uvachatam Smayamana Smarang Anubhashitam Sri Nārada Uvacha Evam Daitya Sutai Prashto Mahābhagavato Sura Uvachatam Smayamana Smaran Anubhashitam. Others, please.
Nārada uvacha, evam daicasutai preshto, Mahābhagavato suraha, uvacha tansmayamanaha, smaranmad anubhashtitam.
Word to word. Sri Nārada uvacha. The great saint Nārada Muni said, Evam, thus, Daityasutai, by the sons of the demons, Prashta, being questioned, Mahābhagavata, the exalted devotee of the Lord, Asura, born in a family of demons, Uvacha, spoke, Tan, unto them, the sons of the demons, Smayamana, smiling, Smaran, remembering, Mat anubhashitam, what was spoken by me. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Nārada Muni said, although Prahlāda Mahārāja was born in a family of asuras, he was the greatest of all devotees. Having thus been questioned by his class friends, the sons of the asuras, he remembered the words spoken to him by me and replied to his friends as follows. Srila Prabhupada's purport. When he was in the womb of his mother, Prahlāda Mahārāja listened to the words of Nārada Muni. One cannot imagine how the baby in the embryo could hear Nārada, but this is spiritual life. Progress in spiritual life cannot be obstructed by any material condition. This is called ahoitukya pratihata. Reception of spiritual knowledge is never checked by any material condition. Thus, Prahlāda Mahārāja, from his very childhood, spoke spiritual knowledge to his class friends, and certainly it was effective, although all of them were children. Om Ajnana-timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militang Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Mukhaṁ Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Jatkripa Tamahang Vande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitang Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamahyang Dadati Svapadantikam Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Prachadine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatade Shatarine Pancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namah. 17 minutes or less. My first thought was, short purport, let's see what other verses we've got. And then we've got, what, eight or 10 verses with no purports. And I thought, I'll let somebody else deal with that. This is actually a very substantive purport, at least for me. There are a couple of things that I pay a lot of attention to, and one is context and the other is connections. So we know the context. Nārada Muni is telling Yudhishthira a story, and then he becomes a character in that story. And as we heard yesterday, Prahlāda Mahārāja is he's teaching his friends about Bhagavat Dharma, and he says, yeah, I heard this from Nārada Muni. And they look at him, what? Man, you're just a kid. When did you have a chance to study with Nārada Muni? So he's going to tell them the story. So we see throughout Srimad Bhagavatam, I don't even remember. Well, we see how the Bhagavatam is a narrative with so many narratives nested within narratives. And I didn't take time this morning to try to trace out how many layers deep we are here. But you've got Shaunaka Rishi telling about how Sutta Goswami heard from Shukadeva Goswami when he was narrating to King Parikshit, and so on. So somewhere along here, Nārada Muni is telling Yudhishthira this story. He set it up with a very interesting suggestion in the first chapter of the seventh canto. He says, early in the first chapter, he says, so because he's setting this up. He wants to make sure that Yudhishthira knows that this is actually a divine Leela. So he says, by the way, those two cousins of yours, Dantavakra and Shishupal, those characters used to live in Vaikuntha with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Does anyone remember back to what Yudhishthira's reaction was? I was going to say response, but I think reaction is probably a better word, because it's like WTH, right? What the heck? I mean, that's impossible. He says it's just not possible. So that gives Nārada Muni to tell the story of, once again, of Jaya and Vijaya. So now we've come here, and Nārada Muni is setting us up for the rest of this chapter, which is where Prahlāda Mahārāja explains how he heard this knowledge from Nārada Muni. So Srila Prabhupada points out in his purport, progress in spiritual life cannot be obstructed by any material condition. This is called ahaitukya pratihata. So this refers to the 6th verse of the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavatam, back in the 1st canto. Savai pungsang paro dharmo yato bhakti radhokshaje ahaitukya pratihata yayatma suprasidati. So this is the highest. What we're going to be presented with in the Srimad Bhagavatam is the highest possible dharma. There's dharma and there's dharma, right? At the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. So he says, okay, so for 600 odd verses, we've discussed your situation. You presented a dharmic, what appears to be a dharmic argument against fighting in this war. And what was Krishna's response to that? Yeah, sounds nice, but in this situation, it's not as clever as you might think it is. I mean, essentially, he slaps him down, right? Oh, those speaking learned words, you sound like a fool. This is all highfalutin language that you're giving me about, Varna Sankara and the corruption of women and the dissolution of society, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Sounds nice. sounds like Dharma. He says, but it's not, especially in this situation, it's not at all appropriate. And then he argues for Arjuna's participating in the war from several different angles throughout the Bhagavad Gita. And then he gets to the end. And he says, okay, now I'm going to tell you the most secret of all secret knowledge. It's kind of like, buckle up. Got to get you into the skiff, right? The secure, confidential, whatever it is, room. We had one of those where I used to work in the Navy. And actually our whole building was kind of like that, but there was this place for people who had to work every day with the most restricted of top secret knowledge. And so we got to get you into the skiff, because this is, nobody needs to know this stuff. What he's really saying is everybody needs to know this stuff. So, and he says, so buckle up. And then what is it? And it's Manmana Bhava Madbhakta. Well, he's already said this smack in the middle of the Gita, right? At the end of the 9th chapter. The most confidential knowledge. And he builds up glorifying bhakti as he goes through the chapter, even saying that, well, if someone's intention is fixed on me exclusively, even if they really blow it, apichet sudurachara, right? Even if they do something really awful, still, we should consider them saintly. Because they're rightly situated, they're moving in the right direction. And what he's saying in those two verses, 30 and 31 in the 9th chapter, is that bhakti is so powerful that she will correct anything. She'll take care of anything. So, ahaitu pratihata, this is the highest dharma. And then the Bhagavatam picks up the next step. Okay, now for those who've already given up, and the language is even stronger here, kaitava dharma, right? I can't hear. Well, anyway, I was trying to remember the first. Dharma prodchita kaitavatra paramo niramatsaranam satam. So now that people have completely given up all cheating religion, right? It's very strong language. This is for those people who are completely pure at heart because they've given up all cheating religion. How is it that they're pure at heart? Because there's no envy there. Why is there no envy? No personal agenda. Because they've completely rejected all cheating religion. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explains in Chaitanya Charitamrita, when this verse comes up, I think it's the 22nd chapter of Madhya Lila, which we're going to take a quick look at, different part of it. He says, what do we mean when we say kaitava dharma? What do we mean when we say cheating religion? Dharma, artha, kama, moksha, vansha. Oh, but those are all the four goals of human life, right? Those are the purusha. These are the things that have value. Virtue, making progress in the material world, enjoying the fruits of that progress, and then when you've seen through the whole scam, looking for freedom. Why do we call it cheating religion? Because it's about me. It's about my virtue, my material progress, my pleasure, my freedom. But he says, and Srila Prabhupada, there's a sentence in the purport of that, to that second verse of the Bhagavatam that just turned my mind inside out when I read it, maybe in like December of 1969 or January of 1970. Where Srila Prabhupada explains how everyone in the material world is competing for different kinds of resources, whether it's money, stuff, women, prestige, position, want to be president of the United States or whatever. Everybody's competing. This is a big, especially in American society, and then we've managed to share it with everybody else. This competition, this is a big value in our culture.
The biggest one is hits on Facebook.
Pardon?
The biggest one is hits on Facebook or likes on Facebook.
Right, but we want more likes than somebody. We want to make sure we got more likes than somebody else. Anyway, so this is our life in our cultures, competition. And Srila Prabhupada says, but not only are the transcendental devotees of the Lord are not only free from this competitive spirit, but they strive to create a competition-less society with God at the center. And when I read that sentence, I knew I found the revolution that we'd all been looking for in the 60s. This is it, right here. Sign me up. So, ahituki apratihata. So it can't be obstructed by anything material because it doesn't have any cause other than itself. The 11th canto, we hear the sage Prabuddha as he's instructing King Nimi about the importance of taking shelter of a spiritual master. He says, Smaranta smarayantascha mito gaugha harang harim bhaktya sanjataya bhaktya bibhrati upalakam tanum. As the devotees of the Lord constantly discuss the glories of the personality of Godhead among themselves. Thus, they can constantly remember the Lord and remind one another of his qualities and pastimes. In this way, their devotion to the principles of bhakti, by their devotion to the principles of bhakti yoga, the devotees please the personality of God who takes away from them everything inauspicious. Being purified of all impediments, the devotees awaken to pure love of Godhead, and thus even within this world, their spiritualized bodies exhibit symptoms of transcendental ecstasy, such as standing of bodily hairs on end. So this phrase in the third pada, bhaktya sanjataya bhaktya, this says it all. Bhakti doesn't have any cause other than bhakti. Bhakti is generated by bhakti. We get sadhana bhakti from the bhaktas who carry bhakti in their heart. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains this at the very beginning of Madhurya Kadambini. He's got this somewhat extended argument just how independent Krishna is, which is absolutely, completely 108%, 1,008%, 10,008%. Put as many zeros in there as you want. He is completely independent. And he does that to make the point that bhakti is every bit as independent as Krishna. And she can go anywhere she wants, but here's how she works. Having taken shelter in the heart of the devotees, when someone among the Madhyama Bhaktas, those who are able to discriminate, who can appreciate the message of bhakti, when they feel mercifully inclined towards someone, she follows their lead and enters that person's heart. And then it's game over. Because bhakti is the most powerful force there is. Srila Jiva Goswami in his Priti Sandarbha cites a verse from something called the Mathura Shruti, which I haven't been able to trace out yet. But Shruti makes it sound like it's from the Vedas to me. That bhakti, only bhakti has the power to draw us near to Krishna. Only bhakti has the power to show us Krishna. Only bhakti has the power to control Krishna, to conquer Krishna. Therefore, bhakti is the most powerful thing of all. So we get bhakti from the association of devotees, which we're going to look at in just a minute. And so from that sadhana bhakti, prema bhakti grows. Actually, Srila Rupa Goswami discusses this, and Jiva Goswami in his commentaries discuss this in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, that broadly you say there are two divisions of bhakti. There's sadhana bhakti and prema bhakti. Sadhana bhakti and sadhya bhakti, accomplished bhakti. But you can look at it a little more closely. You can see there's a sort of an intermediate stage, which is bhava bhakti. So we get bhava bhakti from we get sadhana bhakti from the bhaktas. We get, from associating with the bhaktas. Well, that's an act of bhakti. That's one of the most important angas of sadhana bhakti. And we get bhava bhakti from sadhana bhakti, and prema bhakti grows out of bhava bhakti. So, bhaktya sanjataye bhaktya. Bhakti is generated by bhakti. So, that association of devotees, we hear from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, is the root cause of devotional service. Let's put it on 1.75 speed. Put it on 2 and I'll start to sound like Alvin. So this is discussed in this very, very important chapter in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. I don't think, it's like someone would ask you, what's your favorite chapter of Chaitanya Charitamrita? It's like asking, which is your favorite child? It's not possible. But this chapter it's really essential because Lord Chaitanya discusses with Sanatana Goswami this huge range of topics around the process of devotional service, as Srila Prabhupada titles the chapter. So at one point, Lord Chaitanya says, by good fortune one becomes eligible. I'm going to skip all the Sanskrit because of time. By good fortune one becomes eligible to cross the ocean of nescience, and when one's term of material existence decreases, one may get an opportunity to associate with pure devotees. By such association, one's affection for Krishna is awakened. And then whenever Krishnadas and Rupa Goswami follows this as well in his Chaitanya Charita, in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, when he makes an assertion of his own, he always supports it with something from the Shastra. Because as Srila Prabhupada says in 17th chapter, the verse that discusses austerity of speech, he says, when speaking in spiritual circles, we always cite, we always make some reference, we always support what we're going to say with Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So this is, and then from the 10th canto, he says, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm right now I'm on 45, 46. 22. O my Lord, O infallible Supreme Person, when a person wandering throughout the universes becomes eligible for liberation from material existence, he gets an opportunity to associate with devotees. When he associates with devotees, his attraction for you is awakened. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the highest goal of the topmost devotees in the universe. And then he says, Krishna is situated in everyone's heart as the Chaitya Guru, the spiritual master within. When he is kind, capital He, when Krishna is kind to some fortunate conditioned soul, he personally gives him lessons so he can progress in devotional service, instructing him, the person as the super soul within and the spiritual master without. And then later, I'm going jetting ahead here to 82 and the following verses. He says, he cites a verse from the 5th canto, King Rishabdev's instructions, Mahatseva Dvara Mahurvi Muktes verse. It is the verdict of all Shastras and great personalities that service to the pure devotee is the path of liberation. By contrast, association with materialistic people who are attached to material enjoyment and women is the path of darkness. Those who are actually devotees are broad-minded, equal to everyone, and very peaceful. They never become angry, and they are very friendly to all living entities. Just previous to this is a section where he describes, Lord Chaitanya describes to Sanatan the character of the devotees, and we heard that yesterday, referred to yesterday, the 26 qualities of a devotee, and then there's a verse from Lord Kapila's instructions. And then Mahaprabhu says, Krishna Bhakti Janma Mula Hoi Sadhu Sangha, Krishna Prema Janme Teho Puna Mukhyanga. The root cause of devotional service to Lord Krishna is association with advanced devotees. Even when one's dormant love for Krishna awakens, association with devotees is still most essential. And then he'll back that up with the verse from the 51st chapter of the Bhagavatam. But I wanted to bring in a little bit more support here from... So Nārada Muni is telling this story of how Prahlāda is telling the story of how he heard from Nārada Muni. But I just lost my place. So we know from the 5th chapter of the 1st canto that Nārada Muni also has a backstory. Right? Actually, he has a backstory and a backstory. What do they say? Every sinner has a future, and every saint has a past, right? So Nārada Muni is sharing with Vyasadeva, I have a past too. He's given them this really important instruction that Vyasadeva is just falling apart. He's just completely depressed because he's done all this work for the upliftment of humankind, compiling the Vedas and the Puranas and then the Itihasas, all for the upliftment of mankind, but he still doesn't feel satisfied. He feels unfulfilled. He knows there's something missing. So his Gurudev comes along and says, oh, okay, here's what's missing. What's missing is something that exclusively glorifies the Lord, his devotees, and his devotional service. The Supreme Person, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and his devotees and his devotional service. And all this other stuff you've done, he compares all other literature, apparently including all the stuff that Vyasadeva has compiled, to what? Anybody remember? A garbage heap. A place of pilgrimage for crows. The dump. And he characterizes it with a very interesting, talk about strong language, except for Dravida. Does anybody remember this one? Because I use it sometimes. Jugupsitam. It's detestable. Just disgusting. All the stuff that you've done compared to what you need to do. We need to keep it in context. It's disgusting. And so then he tells the story. And then he makes this very, very bright distinction between everything else in verses, especially 17 and 19 in that chapter, between everything else in Bhakti. Absolutely everything else, including karma, the karma kanda path, the jnana kanda path, the yoga path, everything. There's a complete, because you have to do all the other things perfectly to get the results, right? I mean, if you do varnashram dharma perfectly for 100 lifetimes, you get to be Brahma. Oh, big whoop. Because when Hiranyakashipu approached Brahma to ask to become immortal, Brahma says, oops, I don't have that one. So try again. He thought he had a workaround. Hiranyakashipu thought he had a workaround. See how that worked out for him. Where am I? So he draws this very clear distinction, and he says, but bhakti, even if you mess up, even if someone falls down somehow or other, they're always going to be haunted by the taste they got from whatever service they did. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains in his commentary on that verse, and 1.5.19, read the verse, read Srila Prabhupada's commentary, and if you can find someone who has Vishwanath, because that commentary is so amazingly powerful and generous. And if you know someone who has access to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's Tika on that verse, read that as well. I think you will. You'll find it chamatkar, quite astonishing. And he says this begins even from the very first day of worshiping the Lord. And he backs that up with a verse from earlier in the 11th canto. I think a verse from Havi to King Nimi. And so after doing that, he says, this, and how do you do that? You do that by the association of devotees. That's how I got here. So we hear that Nārada Muni in a previous lifetime, he was a Gandharva, but he was so enamored of his voice, so full of himself, that he was just like going around trying to wow all the gals, you know. So they're having a big kirtan performance, and he's showing off his voice, singing all these songs, glorifying the devatas, and he gets cursed, and he has to take birth as a Shudra. So in this 5th chapter, he refers to that at the end of the chapter. He says, in a previous millennium, I was born as the son of a maidservant, and apparently a single working mom, right? But as a maidservant, during the rainy season, and Prabhupada's actually one verse says, even including the autumn afterwards, she would have the opportunity to wait on these great sages. Prabhupada calls them Bhakti Vedantas, who would take shelter of her place. And as her son, he got to help, and he got to hear. And he said, I would sneak the remnants of their meals. He said, I would take the remnants from their meals, even without their permission. Kids, don't try this at home. Even without their permission. And then when they would leave, before they left, they would give me some good instructions in Bhagavat Dharma. And this had such a powerful effect on him that even when his mother died while he was still a child, he didn't find himself wallowing in lamentation. Oh my God, I'm a little boy, what am I going to do? He just took off and went and saw the world. And then in his next life, he was Nārada Muni. So this association of devotees is so powerful. I mean, Nārada Muni, such a powerful guru. I think he probably shows up in every chapter of the Bhagavatam. Every canto of the Bhagavatam. And then we hear also in Chaitanya Charitamrita, you know, he met this nasty hunter, Mrigari, who got a big kick out of not just killing animals for a living, but torturing them and watching them squirm and writhe and suffer like anything as they died a slow, awful death. And Nārada Muni was so expert. As we see, wherever we encounter, he gives different kinds of instructions to different students. And so what's his first instruction to Mrigari? Kill the damned animals. Just kill them. This is awful. And he explains the whole cycle, how the cycle of karma works, and how he enlightens him. And Mrigari says, oh boy, you better give me more, because this, you know. So then he tells him, okay, you give up this nasty business. And he says, well, how am I going to make a living? And he says, I'll personally take care of you. So he gives different instructions. This is a really important thing to understand, that, you know, the devotees need to be empathetic with their audience. They need to actually make a connection. This is a very personal business, association with devotees. And if we look at Srila Prabhupada's 7 purposes for establishing both the League of Devotees and the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, you'll see it's all about facilitating sadhu sangha for the purposes that we see in one of the verses that we looked at here. And this is such a powerful thing. The gopis glorify, in the Gopi Gita, 31st chapter of the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, the gopis glorify those who share Krishna Katha as the most munificent souls. There's no one like them. So if we can get a little bit of association with such people who have, whose lives are, who have made their lives Srimad Bhagavatam. I really want to share this. Okay. Just one last thing. This is a poem by the famous Sufi poet Rumi. Yeah. We see in I think Chaitanya Bhagavat, you know, we hear in the Bhagavatam that Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, regularly serving the Bhagavat, is the way to transcendence, the actual way to real liberation. which is only available in Bhakti. And the discussion around that is that there's the book Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat. And we see these two Bhagavats explained in Chaitanya Bhagavat. So this is such a powerful idea that other people also have the same idea. So I discovered this poem quite by accident in a gift shop at one of the Smithsonian museums. This was the last thing my former wife and I did together, was to visit Washington, D.C., something she'd been bugging me to do for 40 years. So I picked up a book of Rumi poetry, and I opened the book to this poem. And the translators, Kabir and Camille Helminski, call it, "Ask the Rose About the Rose." The interpretation of a sacred text is true if it stirs you to hope, activity, and awe. And if it makes you slacken your service, know the real truth to be this: it is a distortion of the sense of the saying, not a true interpretation. The saying has come down to inspire you to serve, that God may take the hands of those who have lost hope. And then he says, ask the meaning of the Quran from the Quran alone, and from that one who has set fire to his idle fancy and burned it away and has become a sacrifice to the Quran, bowing low in humbleness so that the Quran has become the essence of his spirit. If an essential oil has utterly devoted itself to the rose, you can smell either that oil or the rose as you please. And I was so floored. Fortunately, everything in that gift shop was on sale at 35% off that day, because there's no way I was leaving that building without that book. And I had the opportunity to have a Zoom meeting with some Iranian devotees from around the world, facilitated by my friend Ashesha Gaurahari Das, who's a disciple of Jayapataka Mahārāja, who lives in Pasadena now. And they had just finished like a 2.5-year study together online of Bhagavad Gita, and they were moving on to the next text. So Ashesha asked me if I would meet with them online and discuss both Bhagavad Gita, and their next text was to be Ishopanishad. And then at the end he asked me, Maharaj, are there any Sufi poems, he knew the answer to this, that you think are close to Bhakti? And I said, well, funny you should ask. I shared this poem with them, and as it turns out, one of the members of this group is a Rumi scholar. And she recited this poem in 1,200-year-old Farsi. And it was so lovely. I could only pick out a couple words here and there. But what I could hear that's missing in this translation is that it's written in rhyming couplets. And it was just so lovely. So anyway, you can smell either that oil or the rose as you please. We get the same benefit from serving the devotees that we do from hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, because their lives have become, they've burned away their idle fancy and made their lives a sacrifice to the Quran, like an essential oil. Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you so much. Any comments or questions? Dravida Prabhu?
All right, the one thing you said, I'm just interested, you said that Nārada Muni, as a child, serving the Mahabhagavats, he took their prasadam without the permission. That must be from some other Purana or something? Because we have right here, Anumodito Dijaya, once only, by their permission, I took the remnants of their food.
Oh, gosh, I'm going to... I think in the purport...
Oh, in the purport he mentioned that... okay.
Take it with permission or without?
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I'm sorry.
Footnote to that.
Yeah.
When Mahaprabhu says, when he's hearing from Ramananda Roy, and he's being observed that this is kind of extraordinary, that Ramananda Roy is instructing Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu is inquiring of Ramananda Roy. He says, Kiba viprakibanyasi shudra kenenoy, Jai Krishna tatvaveta sei guru hoy. You know, if someone actually understands the science of Bhagavad Dharma, they're worth hearing from. They're a guru, regardless of their status in life. And I can't remember if it's in the purport to that verse or one of those verses. Srila Prabhupada says that kiba viprakibanyasi. It means even if they're a sannyasi, because generally sannyasis don't accept disciples because, one, they're moving around a lot, and two, it's not among their duties to leave remnants. So when I'm served prasadam, I try not to get too much on my plate because I'm an old man. I can only eat so much. I'm not 22 anymore. And then, anyway.
Thank you, Mahārāja, for a wonderful talk. And apologies if this question is too general, but at the beginning of your lecture, you were talking about the nested narrative structure of the Bhagavatam, and I'm wondering if there's a sort of meta-level insight about bhakti that we can glean from the structure, or if that's
one is that it's very deep and rich. I mean, I think that's a real kind of easy, superficial idea to take from that. That bhakti and harikatha, it's very deep, very rich, and can be understood from, as Srila Prabhupada says, many angles of vision as well. I mean, even in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna argues from so many different angles of vision, and then he kind of essentially, at the end, he essentially says, forget it all, forget all this, and just take shelter of me. Everything will be cool. Even if some sins are occurred, I got your back, I have you covered. Ma shuchaha. Don't worry your pretty little head. So that's one, I mean, I think it's a big question, and it's something that I haven't had a chance to explore to the extent that I would like, especially as an old English major. But it's a wonderful question, thank you. See? Homework. I can't give a class without getting homework. Anything else?
I have a quick follow-on if there's time.
Oh, Maitreya, yes. Maitreya.
Thank you very much. So that last question was very nice. I've heard in a few classes that the queen of sleep, very much present where the Bhagavatam is being recited. If you pay rapt attention, when there's a change of speaker, it becomes more interesting and draws you in more. But if you're not attentive, you'll lose the train of thought, and the queen of sleep will capture you.
I like that very much. Thank you.
Last comment on the permission and no permission. You're right, I just looked it up. Prabhupada says that such remnants may be taken even without permission of the pure devotees. So,
but Nārada Muni, he took it with their permission.
Yeah.
Because, as he explains, I was very well behaved.
Yeah.
He was a very good boy, after having been a rascal in his previous life.
Maharaj, I have a question. My question is, you mentioned that the Mrugari story from Nārada Muni, and he told Mrugari, gave instruction to kill, and you mentioned we have to be careful and gentle with meat eater or whoever. And so would you talk about it a little bit in general life that we meet or we come across with those kind of people, and we have how do we, I mean, rather than judging and making faces, or how do we preach, or at least how do we associate with them so we can do something rather than being negative?
Oh, what a nice question. Thank you. Well, I referred to the Madhyama Vaishnavas as generally being, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that Krishna deputes them as agents of his Kripa Shakti. And why the Madhyama Bhaktas? because they can discriminate. We hear also in the 11th canto, early part of the 11th canto, in the instructions from the Navyogendras to King Nimi, that there are three classes. We can analyze there as generally being three classes of Vaishnavas: the Uttama, or highest, the Madhyama, or intermediate, and the Kanishta, or materialistic bhaktas. So the Uttama bhaktas, the Uttama Vaishnavas, might not always be so fit for this kind of work because they can't discriminate. They see Krishna everywhere and in everything. And when they look at someone, they see Krishna is in their heart, and they see that that person is doing so much better service than I am. So who are they going to instruct? The Kanishta bhaktas, they also can't discriminate worth a darn. Because although they may have some piety, they may have some religious or maybe even some spiritual sense, they see Krishna, God is in my church. And I remember 50 odd years ago when I first joined, we used to say there were 257 Protestant denominations. I think there's probably 257,000 now. But God, God's in my church. God's people are my people. And everybody else, poo-poo on them. We don't need them. They can't discriminate. So they're not able to recognize even who is a devotee, who's not. But the Madhyama Vaishnavas, they see four broad categories of entities. They see God, the devotees, those who are innocent, those who haven't yet received bhakti in their heart, and those who are envious. And they behave accordingly. They love God. They make friends with the devotees. They hang out with them. Matchita, matgata, prana, bodhayanta, parasparam. And those who are innocent, they're compassionate. And that compassion means kind of feeling, we need to take a minute to kind of feel where they are. One devotee who used to be famous for his book distribution skills, I heard him explain that he would just he would listen to them. When he would approach someone, he would ask them a couple of questions, get a sense of where they were at, and meet them there. And then they would leave with a book. Quite expert. So, when we're dealing with devotees, this is why, it's nice if you've got a very famous guru who really enlivens you, really inspires you. But if you have someone who understands you, in the Hari Bhakti Vilas, I think it explains, that Brahmins should have Brahmin gurus, and Shudras should have Shudra gurus. The guru should be someone who kind of gets where you are, who cares enough to find out where you are, meet you there, and then kind of like reel you in. Somehow or other, Srila Prabhupada had some mystic power that he was able to connect with people who you might have thought he would never be able to connect with, because he was this very sophisticated, aristocratic Bengali gentleman and pure devotee on top of that, but beneath all that. And how in the world could he have made sense of frankly, crazy people, such as we? But he did, and he connected. I remember reading Mukunda Maharaj's book, Miracle on 2nd Avenue, and Srila Prabhupada was so personal with everyone. Mukunda got busted. He got arrested on some trumped-up charge. And when he got out of jail, the first person he heard from among his friends was Srila Prabhupada. Called him up, Mr. Michael, I heard you were in some trouble. Is everything okay? He just, there was, again, as you say, there was no judgment. It was like, here's my student, here's my friend, and he's had some difficulty. What can I do to help? It's so amazing.
Jack, there's one thing in that. The way I remember it is that all his old friends weren't talking to him. In other words, it wasn't that Prabhupada was the first. The others weren't even trying to reach him because they said, "Oh, he's
He's been contaminated.
Yeah.
He's oogie now.
The Prabhupada said,
Got cooties. You know, he's not one of us because he got arrested for these weird charges. But Srila Prabhupada, I mean, there was no judgment at all. There was, and no, it was just boom. He called him, and to find out find out if he was okay. So anyway, we can, if we're lucky, we find devotees who care enough about us. This is heart business. We connect heart to heart, ideally. And so it's very, very personal.
one coda. When Shyamasundar and Malati had to serve a sentence for drug dealings. They said, I used to sell drugs. Prabhupada said, I used to sell drugs. In other words, he was...
Yeah, I used to sell drugs. Yeah. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantharaja Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Thank you all so very much for your patience. Pancha kalpataru